Welcome to Barnaby's Learning Playground. We're learning about dinosaurs today. Let's begin our grand adventure into the world of dinosaurs. Hello, my incredible time travelers. Are you ready for an adventure of truly gigantic proportions? Excellent. Today we're not just reading a story. We're stepping back in time, over 65 million years ago, to a world that was wilder, wetter, and warmer than anything you can imagine. A world ruled by magnificent creatures we call dinosaurs. Imagine, if you will, a land bathed in perpetual warmth. The air was thick and humid, filled with the buzzing of giant insects and the croaking of ancient frogs. Rain fell often, making the rivers swell and the swamps shimmer with life. Towering trees, unlike any we see today, stretched towards the sky, their leaves providing shade for countless creatures. This was a super green world, a jungle paradise where life flourished in every nook and cranny. Our story begins in this amazing place, nestled between vast, lazy rivers and expansive, sun-drenched grasslands that stretched to the horizon. It was a perfect home for some of the biggest and most famous dinosaurs of all time. Let's meet our main characters, shall we? First, behold the magnificent Brontosaurus. What a name, isn't it? Thunder lizard. And thunder it did, with every step of its enormous column-like legs. Brontosaurus was one of the gentle giants, a colossal plant eater. Its neck was unbelievably long, like a living crane, allowing it to reach tender leaves high up in the prehistoric trees. Its tail was even longer, a whip-like appendage that balanced its huge body and might have been used to create a sonic boom to scare away predators. A herd of brontosaurs moving together was like a living mountain range, their soft bellows echoing through the misty mornings. They spent their days near the wide, slow-moving rivers, munching on soft water plants and occasionally wading into the shallows to cool their massive bodies. They were peaceful, communal animals, finding comfort and safety in their numbers. And towering even above the Brontosaurus, we have the magnificent Brachiosaurus. The name Brachiosaurus means arm lizard, because its front legs were much longer than its back legs, making its shoulders incredibly high, almost like a super giraffe. This gave it an advantage no other creature had. It could reach the very tippy-top leaves of the tallest trees, leaves that no other dinosaur could even dream of tasting. Brachiosaurus, too, was a gentle giant, a plant eater who needed to eat a truly astonishing amount of food every single day to fuel its enormous body. Imagine eating a whole truckload of salads every single day. That's what a Brachiosaurus did. They were often found near the same rivers as the brontosaurs, their long shadows stretching across the water as they drank or plucked leaves from the riverside canopy. Their sheer size was their greatest defense, a living fortress against almost any threat. Now, for something completely different. Meet the incredible Ankylosaurus. This dinosaur was like a living tank, a walking fortress. Ankylosaurus means fused lizard because its entire body, from its head to its tail, was covered in thick bony armor plates fused into its skin like a knight's suit of armor. It even had sharp spikes running along its sides, and its most famous feature, a giant bony club at the end of its tail. If any hungry predator, even a T-Rex, dared to get too close, the Ankylosaurus would swing that powerful tail club and wham! That would certainly send a message. Ankylosaurus was a low-grazing plant eater, munching on ferns and ground-level vegetation in the grassy plains and swamp edges. They were solitary, peaceful creatures unless threatened. Then they became a force to be reckoned with. And here's another famous plant eater, our courageous Triceratops. Remember, three-horned face. This impressive dinosaur was built like a rhinoceros, strong and sturdy. It had 3 sharp horns on its face, 2 long ones above its eyes, and a shorter one on its snout, and a massive bony frill that covered its neck and shoulders like a protective shield. Triceratops lived in herds, often grazing in the open grasslands and near the edges of the forests. They were powerful, determined creatures, and like the Ankylosaurus, they knew how to defend themselves. A charge from an adult Triceratops was something even the biggest predators thought twice about. They were social animals, communicating with bellows and snorts, always keeping an eye out for danger. And now, the most famous predator of them all, the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tyrant lizard king. Look at those powerful legs, that huge head, and those banana-sized teeth. T-Rex was the undisputed top hunter of its time. a formidable carnivore that roamed the entire landscape, from the dense swamps to the open grasslands. Its sense of smell was incredible, helping it find prey from miles away. While its arms were tiny, they were surprisingly muscular, though no one is quite sure what they were for. A T-Rex was a solitary hunter, a powerful force of nature, always on the lookout for its next meal. Its roar was said to shake the very ground, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest dinosaurs. So, imagine this incredible world, these magnificent creatures living side by side. The climate was just right for them, very warm, even hot most of the time. The air was thick with moisture, making everything grow big and lush. Rivers wound like giant serpents through the landscape, providing endless water for the thirsty giants and shaping the very land. Swamps, rich with thick mud and dense vegetation, were teeming with smaller life and offered hiding places. And then, vast grasslands spread out, like huge green carpets, perfect for grazing herds. Chapter 1. The Great River Crossing. Our story begins near the widest of these rivers, a slow, powerful artery that snaked through the land like a giant shimmering ribbon. A herd of brontosaurs, led by an old wise female named Tara, was preparing for their annual journey. The dry season was approaching in the highlands, and the juiciest, most tender water plants were now on the other side of the river, in the fertile lowlands. Tara, with her incredibly long neck stretched high, surveyed the wide expanse of water. The river was known for its deep spots and strong currents, but it was also a source of life. Her herd, dozens of massive gray-skinned bodies, shifted restlessly behind her. Young brontosaurs, no bigger than small houses, nuzzled against their mother's legs. A gentle rumble passed through the herd, a mix of apprehension and determination.
The time has come. The grass across the water calls to us.
One by one, the mighty brontosaurs began to enter the water. It was a slow, deliberate process. Their massive legs found purchase on the muddy riverbed, and their bodies, buoyed by the water, floated gracefully. Only their long necks and heads remained above the surface, like periscopes scanning the distant shore. The young ones, swimming close to their parents, made soft, anxious chirps. Imagine that. A whole herd of dinosaurs, swimming across a river. What an amazing sight that must have been. As they crossed, their thundering presence stirred up the river. Huge fish, bigger than any we see today, darted away. Long-necked plesiosaurs, marine reptiles that lived in the water, watched from a safe distance, curious but cautious. The air filled with the splashing and the gentle snorts of the brontosaurs. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell over the lead brontosaurs. From the dense, swampy reeds on the far bank, a colossal head emerged, its eyes, the color of amber, fixed on the herd. It was Rex, a male Tyrannosaurus Rex, one of the largest and most fearsome hunters in the region. He had been lurking, patiently watching, waiting for the perfect opportunity. He knew the brontosaurs were vulnerable during their crossing. A deep, guttural growl rumbled in Rex's throat, vibrating through the humid air. It wasn't a full roar yet, just a warning, a declaration of presence.
Stay together, protect the young.
The brontosaurs instinctively huddled closer, forming a defensive cluster in the water. Rex watched, calculating. Even for him, a full-grown brontosaurus was a challenge. They were too massive, too powerful. His gaze fell on a younger brontosaurus, struggling slightly with the current near the edge of the herd. An easier target. But before Rex could make his move, a new sound cut through the air. A series of piercing trumpets, like distant bugles. From the dense jungle bordering the river, a small herd of Brachiosaurus emerged. Led by a wise old female named Skygrazer, they had come to the river to drink, unaware of the drama unfolding. Skygrazer, with her impossibly long neck, saw Rex and the struggling brontosaurus. She let out a series of deeper, more resonant trumpets, a sound of alarm. The other Brachiosaurus joined her, their immense bodies casting even bigger shadows. Their sheer size was intimidating. Rex hesitated. Two herds of giants were too much, even for him. He preferred easier prey, or at least a less crowded hunting ground. With a frustrated huff that stirred the water, Rex slowly retreated back into the shadows of the swampy reeds, his chance lost for now. The brontosaur herd, shaken but safe, completed their crossing. On the far bank, they let out a collective sigh of relief. some of the younger ones collapsing onto the soft grass, exhausted. The Brachiosaurus herd, after taking a long, quenching drink, lumbered off into the taller forest, their crisis averted. Phew! That was a close call for the brontosaurs. But the amazing Brachiosaurus helped them out. Even the king of the dinosaurs has to think twice when faced with so many giant friends. Chapter 2. The Armored Guardian and the Grassy Plains. The rich, warm grasslands were a tapestry of swaying green and golden hues, dotted with clumps of cycads and ancient flowering plants. Here, life thrived in a different way. This was the territory of the Triceratops herds and the solitary Ankylosaurus. One afternoon, a large herd of Triceratops, led by a strong matriarch named Hornshield, was peacefully grazing. They moved slowly, their powerful jaws crunching on the tough vegetation. Young Triceratops, with their little budding horns, playfully butted heads, practicing for their future roles as guardians. Nearby, a lone Ankylosaurus named Boulder lumbered along, its heavily armored body moving with a surprising slowness. Boulder was content, munching on low-lying ferns, his tail club swinging gently with each step. He didn't need a herd. His armor was his protection, his club his mighty weapon. Suddenly, a rustle in the tall grass. A large, shadowy form began to move, expertly hidden by the waving blades. It was another T-Rex, a female named Scarlet, known for her cunning and stealth. She had been observing the Triceratops herd for hours, waiting for a straggler, a weak link. Scarlet burst from the grass, heading directly for a young Triceratops that had wandered slightly too far from its mother. The herd trumpeted in alarm. Scarlet, though fierce, knew the danger. A direct charge from an adult Triceratops could be fatal even for her. She swerved, trying to get around the flank of the herd, aiming for the younger, less experienced members. But as she tried to circle, her path brought her too close to where Boulder the Ankylosaurus was grazing. Boulder, startled by the sudden commotion, lifted his head. He saw the T-Rex, its huge jaws snapping, its eyes focused on the Triceratops. He wasn't part of their herd, but he wasn't about to let a predator use his territory as a hunting ground. With a surprisingly swift movement, Boulder swung his massive tail club. Thwack! The club hit a fallen log with a deafening crack, sending splinters flying. It was a clear warning. Scarlet skidded to a halt. The sheer power of that tail swing, the sound of the club against the log, was enough to make her reconsider. She looked from the charging Triceratops to the unmoving armored Ankylosaurus, its tail now held ready. Two formidable opponents, both ready for a fight. This wasn't an easy meal. This was a battle she wasn't sure she would win. With a frustrated growl, Scarlet decided discretion was the better part of valor. She turned and melted back into the tall grass, disappearing as quickly as she had appeared. The Triceratops herd let out triumphant snorts, their horns still held high. Hornshield nudged Boulder gently with her snout. A silent thank you. Boulder merely dipped his head, then went back to his steady munching, his armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. He had defended his patch of grassland, and in doing so, helped his plant-eating neighbors. Wow! Talk about teamwork, even when they're not in the same family. The brave Triceratops and the super-armored Ankylosaurus working together to keep the T-Rex away. Even the fiercest predator knows when to back down. Chapter 3. The Swampy Sanctuary and the Shifting Earth. The warm, wet climate meant constant changes in the landscape. Rivers would overflow, creating new swamps, and ancient lagoons would slowly dry up. One particularly dense swamp, known as the Whispering Fen, because of the rustling of its tall reeds, was a haven for many dinosaurs, especially during the hottest parts of the day. Deep within this fen lived an old Brachiosaurus named Atlas. He was one of the largest Brachiosaurus ever seen, his long neck often mistaken for a distant tree trunk. Atlas loved the swamp. The deep mud cooled his huge feet, and the abundant water plants were delicious. He rarely ventured far from its protective embrace, preferring the calm solitude. Not far from Atlas, a small family of Ankylosaurus, a mother named Stoneback, and her two smaller, spikier young ones, had also made their home. The thick vegetation and muddy terrain made it difficult for large predators to move quickly, offering them an extra layer of protection. They would wallow in the mud, letting it cake their armor, making them even harder to spot. One sweltering afternoon, the ground began to tremble. Not the usual distant rumble of a brontosaurus herd, but a deeper, more unsettling vibration. The birds in the trees took flight, squawking in alarm. The water in the fen began to ripple strangely. An earthquake, a common occurrence in this volatile ancient world, where continents were still shifting and volcanoes often erupted in the distance. This one was a big one. Trees swayed violently and mud bubbled. The ground beneath them became unstable, threatening to swallow them whole. Panic began to spread through the smaller creatures in the swamp. Stoneback immediately pressed her young close, shielding them with her armored body. The ground beneath them became unstable, threatening to swallow them whole. Atlas, despite his immense size, felt the Earth's fury. A crack appeared in the ground near him, releasing a puff of steam. The tremors threatened to dislodge him, to send his towering form crashing down. He knew the safest place during an earthquake was often open ground, away from falling trees and sudden mudslides. With slow, determined steps, Atlas began to move towards a patch of slightly firmer, higher ground on the edge of the fen. But as he went, he saw Stoneback and her young, trapped in a rapidly widening fissure. They were too slow, too heavy to escape the crumbling earth. Atlas, usually so focused on his peaceful existence, knew he had to act. He let out a low, rumbling bellow, a deep call of warning and concern. He then did something extraordinary. He deliberately placed his massive tree trunk-like front leg across the widening fissure, creating a temporary bridge.
Move! Hurry!
Just as the last young ankylosaurus reached safety, Atlas pulled his leg back, and the fissure widened with a gulping sound, the ground heaving as if it were breathing. Atlas then continued his steady march, reaching the higher ground just as the worst of the earthquake subsided. The air was filled with dust and the smell of disturbed earth, but the immediate danger had passed. Stoneback brought her young close to Atlas's massive feet, a silent gesture of profound gratitude. The giant brachiosaurus simply blinked his large, gentle eyes, then began to placidly pluck leaves from a sturdy tree that had survived the quake. In this wild world, even solitary giants could show incredible compassion. Oh, what an amazing act of kindness! Even though they were so different, the huge brachiosaurus helped the little ankylosaurus family. It shows us that even in the wildest places, there can be friendship and helping hands, or helping legs in this case. Chapter 4: The T-Rex's Challenge and the Triceratops Stand. Life in the warm, wet plains continued its cycle of hunting and grazing. Rex, our mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex from the river crossing, was growing bolder. He had been unsuccessful in his last 2 hunts, and his hunger was growing fierce. He patrolled the edge of the grasslands, his keen senses alert for any sign of weakness. He soon found it. A small herd of Triceratops, smaller than Hornshield's main group, was grazing near a cluster of tall, swampy trees. Among them was an older, slightly slower Triceratops named Rusty, whose horns were chipped from many past battles. Rex knew this was his chance.
He launched his attack with a terrifying roar that echoed through the swamp. Roar! The sound sent birds scattering and smaller creatures fleeing in terror.
The Triceratops herd immediately formed a defensive circle, their heads down, horns facing outwards. Rusty, despite his age, took his place at the front, his chipped horns still a formidable threat. They were ready. Rex circled the herd, looking for an opening. A moment of hesitation. He feinted left, then right, trying to confuse them. He snapped his massive jaws, the sound like thunderclaps. The air grew thick with tension. Then, with a burst of speed, Rex charged directly at Rusty. He aimed for the older Triceratops, knowing it might be the weakest link.
With a defiant bellow, he met the charge head-on. Crash! The impact was tremendous, bone against bone, muscle against muscle.
Rex's huge head collided with Rusty's sturdy frill, and Rusty's horns dug into Rex's tough hide. Rex recoiled, shaking his head. Rusty, though shaken, held his ground, breathing heavily. The other Triceratops trumpeted their support, tightening their circle. Rex stared at Rusty, a grudging respect dawning in his amber eyes. This Triceratops was old, but he was incredibly tough and brave. Rex knew that continuing this fight would mean serious injury, perhaps even death for himself. A T-Rex, no matter how powerful, could not afford to be badly wounded. In this wild world, a severe injury meant slow starvation. With a frustrated snort, Rex took a step back, then another. The Triceratops held their position, horns unwavering. Slowly, deliberately, Rex turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the dense vegetation of the swamp. He would have to find an easier meal elsewhere. The Triceratops had won the day.
Rusty, after a moment, shook his head and let out a tired but triumphant bellow. The herd nudged him, praising his bravery. They had faced the tyrant lizard king and held their ground.
What an amazing show of courage! The Triceratops, even an old one like Rusty, stood up to the mighty T-Rex. It shows us that even the biggest and fiercest bullies can be scared away by bravery and standing together. Chapter 5. The Harmony of the Green World. The sun began its slow descent, painting the warm, wet sky in hues of orange, purple, and fiery red. The sounds of the ancient world began to shift, the daytime chirps and roars giving way to the calls of nocturnal creatures. Near the wide river, the brontosaurs, having completed their crossing, were now happily munching on the succulent water plants, their massive forms looking like peaceful hills against the twilight. Tara, the wise leader, watched over them, content in the knowledge that her herd was safe and well-fed. In the high forests, the brachiosaurus herd, including Skygrazer and the heroic Atlas, continued their slow, majestic grazing, their long necks silhouetted against the setting sun. They were the gentle guardians of the tallest trees, their presence a quiet reassurance to many smaller creatures. On the open grasslands, the Triceratops herds settled down for the night, forming tight defensive clusters. Hornshield surveyed her sleeping family, confident in their numbers and their strength. Rusty, the old hero, was nestled comfortably, dreaming of lush ferns. And Boulder, the solitary ankylosaurus, had found a secluded patch of dense undergrowth. His armored body was perfectly camouflaged, and his tail club rested quietly beside him. He was a small, unmoving fortress in the dim light, safe from harm. Even Rex, the T-Rex, had eventually found a meal, perhaps a smaller, less formidable dinosaur, or a carcass he had scavenged. He was resting now, deep within the tangled swamps, his massive body camouflaged by the shadows, waiting for the new day and new hunts. So you see, my young adventurers, this was the great green world of giants. A place of immense power and surprising harmony. The warm, wet climate, the winding rivers, the deep swamps, and the endless grasslands. They all played a part in creating this incredible ecosystem. The brontosaurs and brachiosaurus, with their immense size, lived peacefully by the rivers, reaching for the high leaves and sharing the cool water. The ankylosaurus, like living tanks, and the Triceratops, with their 3 horns, patrolled the grasslands and swamp edges, ready to defend themselves with incredible bravery. And even the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tyrant lizard king, played its part, keeping the other dinosaur populations strong by testing their resilience and preying on the weak. Each dinosaur, big or small, plant eater or meat eater, had its role in this vast, ancient ballet of life. They were all amazing, all powerful, and all part of a world that existed long, long ago. It's incredible to think about, isn't it? Our world was once filled with such magnificent creatures, and learning about them helps us understand just how amazing life on Earth has always been, and how important it is for all creatures, big and small, to live together, even when they're different. Thank you for joining Barnaby on this grand journey back in time. Until our next adventure, keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep dreaming of those magnificent giants.